I want to welcome you to the November 8th meeting of the Rotary Club of Columbus. I would ask that we would just take a moment of silence to remember the McKnight family, the Wade family, and others tragedies that we've had in our community in this last week. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pastor, would you?
Let us pray. Almighty God of us all, we come before you today with heaviness in our hearts and on our minds. Heaviness as a community as we remain in shock over two tragic deaths this past weekend. We pause to lift up the Wade and McKnight family and for all of those who will be caring for them in this time of loss. We especially lift up our fellow Rotarian, Reverend Grace Burton Edwards, who will be conducting the service this weekend. Let your Holy Spirit be the guiding light through this time of darkness. And for the people of the First Baptist Church of Phoenix City, we ask for your Spirit to give them guidance and peace in the midst of their shock over losing their pastor. And finally, God, we have heaviness in our hearts as a nation as we continue to watch the events in Israel and Palestine. May your Spirit rule over the earth, bringing peace and human decency back to the forefront. Continue to lead us as Rotarians to build goodwill and better friendships wherever we go. May we be your vessels of truth and fairness and beneficial relationships around the world. Come, holy God, and we pray in your mighty name. Amen.
Thank you, Thad. And Leanne's going to bring us the news for today. Oh, remember the cups.
The kids. Well, good afternoon. Here are today's headlines for Wednesday, November 8th. With the return of 3 pandas to China, U.S. could soon have none. The National Zoo's beloved bears are set to leave within the hour, while the loan agreement with the country's only other pandas at Zoo Atlanta is expiring in 2024. Their departure leaves Zoo Atlanta as the only one in the U.S. with a giant panda program. But it's definitely a giant panda problem if there's no pandas. But the loan agreement for the zoo's 4 pandas expires next year, raising the prospect that there could be no pandas in the U.S. for the first time since 1972. In Columbus, Georgia, construction on Columbus's brand new judicial building got the green light in Tuesday's city council meeting. Contractors and architects gave council members an update on the budget and presented a visual for council members to see exactly what it will look like once it is complete. The judicial building will consist of 8 floors with 18 courtrooms and underground parking. The building is expected to cost around $185 million. These funds coming from bonds sold and SPLOST tax dollars. Construction is expected to begin in 2026. And on this day, in 1895, a German physicist became the first person to observe X-rays, a significant scientific advancement that would ultimately benefit a variety of fields, most of all medicine, by making the invisible visible. Today's weather includes sunshine and a high of 80, and the Dow Jones was down by 120 points at 12:15. Have a great day and sprinkle a little kindness wherever you go.
Okay, Frey is going to introduce our visitors and guests for today.
President Tom and fellow Rotarians, we have with us a visiting Rotarian. Tommy Hightower is here from the North Columbus Club. Welcome, Tommy. And John Stacy has Council Member Tanya Tucker here today. Welcome, Tanya. We appreciate your service to the city. Thank you. And that's all we've got today. President
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. Okay, past President Michael will now introduce our Ralph Puckett Jr. Soldier of the Week, Colonel Mike Rogowski.
President Tom and fellow Rotarians, it truly is a great honor and pleasure to introduce our Colonel Ralph Puckett Jr. Soldier of the Week today, Colonel Mike Rogowski. Colonel Rogowski is the Commandant for the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation, more commonly referred to as WINSEC here at Fort Moore, Georgia. And he became Commandant in June of 2022. He's originally from Michigan, a Michigander. He is a 1999 graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point and commissioned as an aviation officer and earned flight qualifications in the Apache attack helicopter. He received a Master of Arts degree in Latin American Studies from Georgetown University in 2010, which really kind of propelled him to where he is today. And following 2 deployments in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, Colonel Rogowski departed the aviation career field and he became a U.S. Army Foreign Area Officer. And if I was even to begin to highlight each of his assignments, deployments, and military courses, I'd far exceed the time Dick Nuremberg has allocated to me today. So just to give you a sense of Colonel Rogowski's distinguished career and a few of his assignments, he's been a company commander of an aviation regiment. He then became the Foreign Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy in Argentina, an Assistant Army Attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Brazil, where he met his wife, the Army Section Chief and Deputy Security Cooperation Chief in Honduras, and several other very significant roles prior to becoming the Commandant at WINSEC. He's received multiple awards and decorations, several that include a Bronze Star, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the Iraq Campaign Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, the Senior Army Aviation Badge, and that's just to name a few. We cannot begin to thank you for everything that you do and everything that you have done for us each and every day, you and your fellow soldiers. And as a token of our appreciation for you joining us today at Rotary, first, I want to present a Rotary Challenge coin, and I know you know what to do with that.
All right, absolutely, thank you.
As the Colonel Ralph Puckett Jr. Soldier of the Week, a certificate.
Okay.
I also have, and let me say too, that in speaking with the Colonel, he and his wife, who live on Fort Benning, they are the very proud parents of a 2-year-old son, Raphael, and I asked him, can he keep up with Raphael at this point? And he said, it continues to get harder each and every day. But we want to thank you for our service to our country, and as a token of our appreciation, we have 2 tickets for you of your choosing anytime at the River Center for Performing Arts, the Columbus Symphony, National Infantry Museum, paid exhibits, the Columbus State University Theater Department, and the Springer. Right. And I hope you will definitely take advantage of that. And finally, last but not least, the book Words for Warriors, authored by Colonel Ralph Puckett and personally inscribed to you. Again, thank you so much for your service. Please join me as we give him a warm Rotary welcome.
I greatly appreciate that applause, and I want to thank all of you from WINSEC. Columbus has been hosting WINSEC since the Institute's founding in 2001, and before that as well. I wanted to let you also know that I would love to come back and speak with you a little bit about that Army career, because it's a little bit different than the standard ones that you see. If you're looking for tales of heroism in battle and all that, unfortunately, mine is not that type of story. However, the Army is a giant place, and there are a lot of areas where people can go and do very interesting things. And to give you just a little snippet, hopefully I can come back sometime, I believe in February. You know, how does an Army aviator 6 foot tall, blonde, a Polish last name, majored in Russian and German, end up being the commandant of the school that teaches U.S. Army doctrine in Spanish. It is a very long and winding road, and very, I believe, interesting to let you know that the Army is a big place, and there's lots of room for everyone of various abilities to do really incredible stuff at the strategic level. So again, thank you very much.
Colonel Rogowski, on behalf of our 270 members, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we will have you back. Please take our regards and thanks to your fellow soldiers out at Fort Moore. Have just a couple of announcements today. So this is that time of the year when we get together a nominating committee for 2024 to 2027 Board of Directors. And we've asked past President Cedric, past President Lori, and past President Gregg to be part of that nominations committee. So we will take a vote as part of our November 29th lunchtime meeting. In the meantime, between now and then, please contact them and let them know of any nominations you would like to make for our future leaders. We're also, excuse me, getting close to that time of the year when we do some Christmas bell ringing to help raise the funds for the Salvation Army. That's going to take place on December 7th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at our usual places at the Hobby Lobby and then the Walmart Grocery over there on Whittlesey. There is a list in the back, and so please sign up and let us know at what time you want to come ring the bells. Also, we still have a number of directories that have not been picked up, so please pick yours up, or if you're online and you'd like us to mail it to you, please let us know that. Well, Christina, would you come introduce our special guest today?
Good afternoon, Rotarians. It is absolutely my pleasure to introduce our speaker and presenter today. Dr. Jonathan Liss is a board-certified neurologist who has built a national following for his highly acclaimed lectures and writings. Dr. Liss has served on the advisory board of the Morehouse School of Medicine, as well as advisory boards of numerous pharmaceutical companies attempting to create better medications for memory care. He is also a widely published research scientist and currently practices medicine and clinical research here in Columbus, Georgia, where he serves as the director of the Columbus Memory Center. Just to add to this lovely introduction that I was given, I have known Dr. Liss for getting close to 20 years. I was privileged to, we just checked the date, in 2017 to attend a press conference with he and Mayor Tomlinson when both the city and the Columbus Memory Center committed to this community memory care. It is available in the form of knowing your memory number. So I'm sure he's going to talk about that today, but I encourage everybody to know their memory number. He has been very supportive of the Alzheimer's Association and all families going through the journey of any type of dementia. So it is a true privilege today for me to introduce and welcome Dr. Liss to our club. Dr. Liss.
And I'm always worried, thank you for having me, I'm always worried about getting applause in advance, because I could just totally let you down. So hopefully I won't. They asked me to keep this to about 25 minutes, so I'll make sure that I do. I'm so excited to be with you today and to see all of you. When I see something like this, it just represents community. And there's nothing more important than community in relationship to Alzheimer's care and advancements. And before I even get into the talk, I just want to encourage you as people that are civic-minded, that if you know a family with this illness, go and help them. It's not enough to say, call me if you need me, or if there's anything I can do for you, give me a call. you actually have to go over there and say, listen, I'm going to sit with your husband on the morning of such and such a date. Why don't you go out and have lunch with your son? Or let me get some groceries for you. Something that makes their life easier so that they don't have to ask. Because most families are very tough-minded. They want to present a perfection to the world, but they do need help. So I'll just point that out. And the slides are over there. So we'll go to the next slide, please. This slide just makes me look nicer. I'm not quite this nice, but this is my daughter, who's now 30, about to give me my second grandchild. She was about 7, and she says, come in, one of the best neurologists in town, of course it's her father, and is speaking tonight, and he will answer every question you have. His talks are not boring. He tells jokes so funny you'll jump out of your seat. Again, my daughter. So let's listen to Dr. Jonathan Liss, written by Hannah Liss. So I always show that because I think, well, he can't be all that bad if he's got a daughter that loves him, right? So let's have a little call to action here, that 50% of all cases of Alzheimer's disease are undiagnosed. And that's always been important because people need answers and people need direction on to how to look to the future. But it's never been more important than now because we have a revolution in the care of Alzheimer's disease going on. Columbus, Georgia has been right in the thick of it. And as you know, we have a past leader of the Alzheimer's Association here with us, so thank you for that introduction. But she had so much to do with helping to get the state of Georgia and Columbus, Georgia, moving forward with this illness and its care. And so Columbus has been one of the world's leaders in research, intervention for this, number 3 in the world in enrollment for the drug that was just released, Leqembi. So that's in the entire world. You think about it, a city of 213,000, a little office in the middle of the city. It takes a community to make that happen, but we certainly outpunch our weight, and because of that, we're known all over the world. But I need you folks to start spreading the word that we have to stop ignoring memory loss. Because now we have a drug, and we have more drugs coming, another one that will be released in probably about 6 or 8 months, and many more research trials for people at the very beginning of disease. And as it stands, most people are not diagnosed at the beginning of disease. In fact, only probably 1% or 2% are diagnosed at the beginning of disease. And these folks will be too late to get these life-changing drugs if we keep ignoring this illness. So only 12% of seniors get an annual cognitive test. We've made that especially easy, as was mentioned. We have a thing that we invented called the memory number. It's the first and only vital sign for the brain. And there is no doctor, there is no cost, and no appointment necessary. You just pop by our office, say, I want to take the memory number. You'll fill out a few pieces of paperwork that says over and over again, I'm not your doctor, and that a bad score does not mean you have Alzheimer's disease, does not mean you have dementia. And frankly, when we came up with this concept of doing this and this vital sign, I did this because I was looking for early disease so we could increase the numbers so that we knew we could find these folks earlier and earlier. But what I wasn't smart enough to realize at the time, and I want you to recognize, is that about 40% of the people that come in and take the memory number in our office come out with impaired scores, but only a tiny fraction of them have things that are not correctable. That people are walking around thinking poorly, and it's unnecessary. Often it's depression or anxiety. Sometimes it's pain syndrome. Sometimes it's sleep disorders. Sometimes it's medication side effects. There's lots of different things that can affect a person's ability to think well. I think that if this was an issue of exercise where you used to be able to walk a mile without a problem, and now you're only doing a half a mile and then a quarter mile, you go to your doctor and say, what's wrong with me? Why am I not walking that fast or running that fast? But with memory, I think that it starts to go down and you still function in your daily life well enough so you don't get it checked out. The memory number can help figure that out for you. And if you're well, it's time to take it, because that way if you take it each year, you'll know if you become unwell. So it's a very nice thing that I'm giving back to the city, that we're giving back to the city. And I just want to mention, when I came to Columbus in 1995, that I didn't have to spend a single dollar on advertising. There was a need for neurologists, and so a long wait happened immediately because Columbus was so welcoming to me and my staff. To give this away, to give away this free thing, I've spent a fortune. How crazy is that? I have to spend a fortune to give away this nice service. So come by, bring a busload. Don't call. We're ready for you. As we go to the next slide, I want to point out that we want you to put us on your social feeds. We have a giant selfie wall. So if you come by the office, take the memory number. Then, by the way, take a selfie and put it on there to encourage other people to come and get checked. Next slide, please. So I want to introduce a couple of terms to you. The first one is dementia. People often have a question: what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? And they don't seem to realize, most people don't seem to realize, that dementia is simply an umbrella. So that poor unfortunate young person who got in a car crash and had a terrible head injury became demented at that moment. But they're not going to be worse tomorrow. They'll hopefully even get a little bit better. But that young person is demented. And Alzheimer's disease is a form of dementia. It happens to make up 2/3 of all of the dementias. And so if you're an older person and you're having some short-term memory problems, and by the way, I don't mean that you walked into the kitchen and you can't remember what you went in there for. That's just a lack of concentration, right? But that you're repeating yourself in important conversations and things that you heard and clearly, yeah, you all did it, right? Yeah. So these are things that you're engaged in, they're important enough to remember, and then maybe you didn't. Then we have to start thinking about this could be something more substantial. But all of us have temporary lapses. And I will tell you that years ago, that I was asked to give a speech, and I've had the luxury of lecturing all over the world, and often they're at Alzheimer's galas. So I keep a speaking calendar, and somebody called and said they would like me to speak at a gala, and I looked at my calendar and it was open, so I said yes, but there was something nagging in my head. So I went home that night and I said, honey, I accepted a speaking engagement for this date. I said, there's nothing on the calendar, but something's nagging at me. Do we have anything that day? And she said, nothing other than our wedding anniversary. And I bring that up as an excuse for each of you, right? And also to recognize that you can have lapses, and it doesn't mean that you have a dementing illness, right? As we age, I was certain that I didn't have a dementing illness. I was, 10 years younger than I am now, or maybe 20 years younger than I am now. But if I'm 20 years older than I am now, will I still think that? That's why, one needs to get these tests on a regular basis to know they're okay. But my wife, just literally maybe 6 months after that happened, I'm driving on the south side of town, it's nighttime, and I missed my turn, and my daughter and my wife are sitting in the back seat, and all of a sudden I hear my daughter scream out, the same one that wrote me that lovely message, by the way, wrote out, "Oh, come on, Mother." And it turns out she had whispered into my daughter's ear, "I'm really starting to worry about your father." So it's all those things. Next slide, please. So the next thing, which is the major innovation, really the most important thing I want to say today in many ways, is this issue of what we call mild cognitive impairment. That's where people are not thinking at the top of his or her game, and it may be related to dementia, but it may not be. It could simply be that they're depressed or whatnot. But I want to focus in on the issue of mild cognitive impairment related to Alzheimer's disease, because now we can painlessly look inside the brain and know if Alzheimer's disease is coming. And what is interesting is we can now look inside and see the protein that caused Alzheimer's disease about 20 years before it actually caused any problems. So that's pretty remarkable. Because we can do that, and we're not at autopsy, a person is living fine and doing well and having essentially a painless test, that we then start looking for ways in which to interdict. How do we stop this? So that drug that we now have on the market, it is available today for people with the very earliest signs of Alzheimer's disease. That drug is being tested at our facility to see if we can prevent Alzheimer's disease from ever starting. So if you have a family history of Alzheimer's disease and you're anywhere between the ages of 55 and 80 and in otherwise good health, come talk to us. It's always free, but you'll have a chance to get a drug that clears the brain of the protein. And the only people that get the drug are people that have the protein, so we don't just give it to anybody. So we prove whether you do or you don't have it. So it's pretty important to think about. Next slide, please. So people with mild cognitive impairment often complain of many different things, everything from mild memory loss, or issues of concentration. In other words, it doesn't have to be a devastating disease, but they remain fully functional. That's the definition of mild cognitive impairment. We are starting to change definitions, and it's not all that important that I tell you this, but it is interesting that now if people have the protein in the brain and they have some slight memory loss, we are starting to call them as having Alzheimer's disease. I'm a little bit against that because people associate Alzheimer's disease with having impairments. But they're saying you have Alzheimer's disease and you have Alzheimer's dementia. So once you have some impairment, you have a dementia. Until then, you have the protein, therefore you have Alzheimer's disease. It'll probably take a long time before that differentiation becomes really well known. So I'm a little hesitant to call people with mild cognitive impairment as having Alzheimer's disease. We'll see. Next slide, please. So this slide is really what I just said to you a moment ago. It talks about the fact that we now know that Alzheimer's disease does not come on with a light switch, that Alzheimer's disease is a disease that progresses over time, and that about 20 years in advance is when the proteins first starts getting laid down. So that's preclinical Alzheimer's disease, and then mild cognitive impairment related to Alzheimer's disease, and then Alzheimer's dementia for mild, moderate, and severe disease. Next slide, please. So I started out with a plea because I was just so taken by the prayers that we started out the luncheon with, and the other speakers talking about the community and of course the great honors that we owe our folks in uniform. because it shows how community-minded this organization is and always has been. And I just wanted to point out that about half the people that take care of a person with Alzheimer's disease are the spouses. And since about half of the people with Alzheimer's disease are age 85 or greater, you can imagine the spouse is 85 or greater. And this takes typically 100 hours of care. So we're asking an 85-year-old to do 2.5 full-time jobs during the week, an almost impossibility. And then if we look at the majority of the rest of the caregivers, it tends to be either the son-in-law, son or son-in-law, or the daughter or daughter-in-law. And I want to point out on the slide, if you see it, that this is simply a font issue. Daughter and daughter-in-law would certainly go above son and son-in-law. It typically falls on the women in society, does it not? And so these folks are often raising their family. They've got a husband or a wife, they got 2 or 3 kids, and a full-time job. And then we always thought that was impossible to do. And now they're taking care of a parent or a set of parents that are in need of help. So 3 different generations being handled by one, typically female, but sometimes male, doing this. These are also impossible tasks. So we have to be able to go in there and say, listen, this is what I'm going to help you with this week. Is it okay if I do that, right? As opposed to call me if you need me. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we're talking about prevention, and we'll go one more slide, please. This is an easy one. So it turns out that dementias are preventable. Brain health can be maintained. And we can reduce, it is estimated we can do 60% of all dementias, okay, so that includes things like stroke dementia and other kinds of dementia, most common one, of course, Alzheimer's disease, by doing just 4 out of these 5 simple things. So most of you are probably doing 3 of them. Let's start out with the first one, which is reducing alcohol intake, or the first one is physical exercise. So weekly moderate or vigorous physical exercise. That sounds like too much, and maybe it is for some people. But actually what we mean is not so much that. What we mean is a brisk 20-minute walk 3 times per week. Brisk defined as essentially getting a little bit of a sweat, all right? So those of you on the verge of a heart attack, talk to your doctor first. But if you're not, then take that brisk 20-minute walk 3 times per week. That's not a lot to ask. And you've now done one of these 5 things. The next is not to smoke. So those of you that are not smokers, that's an easy one. If smoking is your thing, then that's the one you get to keep, but you got to do the other 4, all right? And by the way, I will mention, because I've been very active in the anti-smoking movement as well. And I just want to point out that when we talk about to smokers, people usually say, you need to quit or you're going to die. You need to quit or you're going to have cancer. And the point that I like to make to people is forget all that, because our minds shut down when people say those things. But it turns out there is a list of amazing things that start happening to the body within hours of quitting smoking. Within hours, your stroke risk goes down. Within hours, your risk of emphysema starts to be reduced. And if you're a non-smoker, you've been a heavy smoker, you're a non-smoker for 10 years, your risk of cancer goes down to that as if you weren't a smoker before. That's a remarkable thing, right? So you can recover. The next one is light to moderate alcohol intake, so 1 or 2 drinks a day as opposed to more than that. Not asking a lot. The next one is a brain healthy diet. That's the one that I give up on because I like a Twinkie. But do a little better. You don't have to be perfect, right? Do a little better. If you're a junk food junkie, so to speak, then maybe have a few meals a week that aren't those kinds of things. Maybe add a few more vegetables and fruits to your diet. Maybe that'll make the difference. And then what you're doing today is already one. You all get credit for one, which is remain cognitively engaged. So we know that education is a way in which to fight off this disease. And it doesn't have to be formal education. It just means getting smarter. So our mantra at the Columbus Memory Center is be smarter tomorrow than you were yesterday, which is probably how you live your lives anyway. And so from my personal passion, I read history every single day, or just about every single day. So find your passion. It doesn't have to be reading, by the way. You can build a puzzle. You can, redo a toaster. Something that you didn't know how to do before, make a new pie that you haven't made before. That's a way in which we learn. If you're a news junkie, I know this is going to kill you. Watch the other station for about 15 minutes a day, right? And that'll get your blood to boil. You'll tell everybody why they're so, crazy and out of it and doesn't make any sense, right? So you may end up having a stroke or heart attack, but you won't have dementia, right? So it can be very valuable, right? The next slide is what I've already said to you, which is the memory number. We tried to make it as easy as possible. No doctor, no cost, no appointment. But by the way, we could even in a situation like this, we take the memory number to churches and to community organizations. We have paper copies and we have electronic copies as well. And if it's the issue of, if you have a center, in other words, not a lunchtime meeting, but someplace that people are there every day, like a church, we can drop off the tablets so they could do that. We can drop off 100 of these paper tests as long as there's somebody at that location who'd be responsible, because when people fill out the paperwork, it does have their names and things like on it. So we want it in a secure location where people wouldn't have to worry about their personal information being taken. But we will bring that out to you, and we will then send you the score a couple weeks later so you can have it for your personal files. In other words, it's up to you whether you share it with somebody else. It's your knowledge. And so, again, can't make it easier. Next slide, please, which is research. Want to point out that we have numerous research trials. Research trials are always free, and I want to particularly speak to those of you from underserved communities that that there's a good reason why research involves fewer people from underserved communities than standard white folks, and that's because there's been so much discrimination in our society for so long. And so I want you to understand that we take that very seriously. We hit the issues head on. But with research, there's many, many safety checkpoints now to make certain somebody like me could not do anything like that to anybody ever again. So we have so many authorities that we answer to, so many audits to go to, and we always make certain that people have a phone number to call in case they feel as though they have been mistreated for an independent advisory board. I do want to take some pride in that if you look at the first trial, which released a drug that's not really much used, frankly, called Aduhelm, there's some controversy around it. But in that trial, there were 1,107 people, and out of that, only 20 people were black. Okay, 20 people out of 1,107. I mean, horrific. So the next drug, Leqembi, which is the one that has taken the nation by storm and is certainly available and being used every day, did a lot better, but not where we wanted to be. So out of 900 patients on drug, 4.5% were black. The population, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's probably 11%. I just want to point out to you that we've done better, and I think we do better because we try and treat everybody with decency. And so our enrollment tends to be 22 to 24% of our population in research are black. And the city, I think, is probably about 46%. So part of you is like, well, 22, 24%, but that's only half the population that we should be getting. But the reality is I don't think an issue of trust. It's because the same thing with every population is that people are too late in the disease to take advantage of the innovations that we're seeing with these drugs. So it's most people that come to the office don't have a chance to get into research and don't have a chance to take advantage of these new drugs because they're just too far along. That's why you need the memory number. That's why you need to, by the way, that 12% that get their test annually, you can get a test like this through your primary care doctor. The primary care doctor does get paid to do it. But I think there's a don't ask, don't tell policy amongst us. The patient doesn't want to know, and the doctor doesn't want to do it. And so it doesn't get done most of the time. Next slide, please. Oh, you're already on that. Go back to that one if you wouldn't mind. Well, we've essentially covered that. All right, so we'll skip one frame further. Treatment has always been available. They're getting better because we're getting better medicines. But I want you to know there's a revolution in care that's going on in all aspects of this, not just medication, but non-medication things, and I'll allude to that in just a second. The slide that's up right now is a remarkable slide that used to get a giant wow. I actually showed this to this audience a number of years ago, but this is a PET scan, and the red on the PET scan is the amyloid protein that we do not want, okay? And so when you look at that's the trouble that we're trying to get rid of to begin with. That's how the disease starts. Once the disease has been there for a few years, I don't mean the first 20, but when people start having symptoms, then another protein gets in the brain, and this protein no longer becomes all that important. And that's why we need people early. The drugs that we're using right now gets rid of this protein and reduces the cascade of events that occur, okay, starting early. So in any case, if you look at the bottom right, you'll see that there's a brain that does not have any red in it. That's a brain that was treated with one of these drugs that we're talking about for 1 year, cleared almost every bit of it out of the brain. And that was a monumental moment. And I think it's so interesting because I really wasn't expecting a wow out of you because we've gotten used to it, right? Just like we've gotten used to our cell phones and other technology. We're now getting used to this advancement, and so we're on to the next thing. So I'm really pleased that it's no longer shocking news, but it still makes me, tingle to know that we could do this. When I started out in this field 30 years ago, that I always tell people I wouldn't be so depressed if I knew today was coming. And I also, when I started 30 years ago, neurologists were known as reasonably nice people, reasonably bright, but never could help anybody. And now in this 30-year career that I've had, we have subspecialties or specialties, or subspecialties in headache, in epilepsy, in multiple sclerosis, in Parkinson's disease, in movement disorders, and the list goes on. And as of this drug being approved a couple months ago, dementia, Alzheimer's disease is now a subspecialty in our society. It's really a remarkable journey. So if we go to the next slide, please. I want to talk about non-medication stuff. So this issue of electronics have revolutionized what we do. They help me in my office every single day. And I want to encourage just about anybody who's older to get one of these things, Siri, Alexa, Google Voice, there's probably 100 other ones. But if you don't need it, that's the time to get it. And so when you do this, you start relying on this personal assistant to remind you of things. Remind me to take my medicine from, Alexa, remind me to take my medicine from the green container every morning at 8:30. Okay, I will. Alexa, remind me my son's going to pick me up for lunch, Tuesday, November 11th at 11 o'clock. Okay, I will. Alexa, tell me the day, month, and year each day. Okay, I will. Alexa, remind me to turn off the oven in 1 hour. Okay, I will. When you start building in these natural routines, that if your memory starts to fade, you won't skip a beat. Okay, and so this is revolutionizing people's ability to stay home. Some of you probably in the audience have a cane. Some of you in the audience probably have a bad hip. And I want you to know that things like Fitbits, many Fitbits and Apple Watches and various different electronic devices now have accelerometers in them. So if the device falls to the ground, the device believes that you fall into the ground. You'll have a moment to press a button saying, it just fell, I'm okay, or it'll send an emergency message that you have fallen. So nobody has to be on the ground ever again for those 12 hours or 24 hours while the loved one calls and finds out that you didn't pick up the phone. And also for the loved one, it gives them confidence each morning when they do call you that they know you're going to answer the phone. So if you have a gait problem, please, think about getting one of these devices. By the way, you look hip and cool to your grandchildren. We have the Alzheimer's Association has a thing called Safe Return. If you're willing to send in your picture and give legal access to your health records, if you ever get lost in your car, or lost anywhere, but typically the car, and you didn't bring your cell phone or the cell phone battery's dead, the Alzheimer's Association takes responsibility for the entire search. It's becoming less important with all of the different GPS technology we have, but it's still there, still important. And then there's electronic pill dispensers. So there's tabletop pill dispensers. These things don't cost very much. And these dispensers, if you don't press the button, they send a text message to your loved one saying, hey, remind him or her to take her medicine. Okay? So it's pretty neat. Next slide. This one, just as an aside, we invented an app that's in the Apple and the Android store that helps people have privacy. So if you're sleeping and your loved one doesn't realize it's 3 a.m., they can call you. When they call you, your voice comes on and says, hey, Mom, it's 3 a.m. I'm sleeping until 6 a.m. The computer comes on, tells what time it is. It says, if this is an emergency, go ahead and press 8 and I'll be awakened. But remember, I'm asleep. It's a free app. It's not the best app in the world, but it is a bit of a help that I want to mention to you. Next slide, please. So we've been innovative with the help of the city government, and I've almost got through my talk, and I should have started with to say I am so grateful to Mayors Henderson and Tomlinson and the city council and Pop Barnes in particular and Colonel House in particular. They have been such champions of trying to move brain health forward. I cannot tell you the amount of work and effort and largesse that they have done on our behalves. So I want to say thank you to all of them. This city has an amazing partnership between private enterprise and government, and we should just tip our hats to it. Not every city has that, and we've elected really great leaders. So I'm pat on our own backs. We did it. We elected them. And I'll just mention to you that depression and anxiety are very common in society. It turns out that there's laughter therapy, very simple laughter therapy that can make a difference. It's on our website. You'll feel like an idiot doing it, but you'll feel better when you do. And remember, in cities and countries where there are long winters, people get depressed because they're not getting exposed to sunlight. So bright light boxes can naturally fight off depression. So for those of you that can't get out as much because your hips hurt or whatnot, that you can have this little light box sitting next to your favorite chair and get antidepressant care without any effort whatsoever. They used to cost $300. They're now $20, $25. Thank you, Amazon, right? And then I don't know if Cole brought any. He's my communications director who always does a fantastic job. But on our website and also at our office, we have a booklet that I've written called Living Well. It's just a short primer. It's a 30-minute read to help you recognize the signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, help you do better with brain health, help you help a loved one with their brain health issues. And with that, I believe my time is up, and I want to thank you for having me today. Thank you.
I think we have time for one question.
Dr. Liss, I want to start with thank you. You were actually my great-grandfather's neurologist. He has Alzheimer's, but he's now in hospital care. That being said, take
Yeah, I think both things can be said. Let me just say, so any brain cell one loses for whatever reason, diabetes, smoking, boxing, soccer, football, all these kinds of things, that's a brain cell that is not present to protect you against Alzheimer's disease. That's really what they're saying when you have the traumatic brain injury. The disease itself is about the layering down of amyloid and eventually other proteins in the brain. Now that we can look into the brain, we have a chance to actually interdict that process. So what I would say is don't worry too much about it in the sense that it's a very common disease. We all should worry about it. I don't know the word more than other people so much. I think you're a perfect candidate to get the memory number each year, because if you're having some difficulties, you'll know what they are today. And then you'll be able to compare 10 years from now. And that's the time where you're going to want to go get an evaluation if you see it changing. But live as healthy a lifestyle you can. I just think mostly everything in moderation. Nobody can be a perfect person. And so keep having fun in life, just in moderation to some degree. And have that cognitive test once a year. And you're right, we're much closer than 40 years, by the way. We are getting really close to having a major event. And this last thing, I don't want to take up too much time. So in this drug that we use with Leqembi, and this is true of every drug. In every drug, you'll see people that have an average response, and then you'll see a small percentage of people who have an incredible response and a small percentage of people that don't respond well at all. And by chance, this very early time frame, we think we figured out why people have an amazing response. Some people have essentially a cure from the drug, okay? And we think we know why, and the most beautiful thing about that, if it turns out to be true exactly, is that it's because they have not progressed enough with a different kind of phosphorylation in the brain. So with our prevention research, which we'll have the answer in about 3 years, okay, that if we're right about this, that this drug being used that early in the brain should make a monstrous difference in slowing or stopping the disease. So we're on the track, okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, certainly your work fits our theme for this year, creating hope in the world. And I want to thank you for being here today. We're going to put a children's book in the library with your name in it to recognize this. Christine, I want to thank you for your past work in Alzheimer's disease. Okay, at this time, I want to re-welcome all of our visiting Rotarians and guests. And Colonel Wachowski, thank you for coming to visit us today. Mia, tell us about the week.
Hello. I haven't really done much. It was a friend's birthday, and we celebrated with her, and then homework and stuff. I don't really have much.
Okay, not much sounds like a good week. So, yeah. So next week, we're going to have Dr. Stuart Rayfield from CSU with us. So please plan to attend. I'm going to ask Thad to come up and lead us in the four-way test.
Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?